The cases themselves, are fairly independent. It's actually the case method type of teaching. I don't know, Johnny, did you ever use case method teaching in business school?
I'm right here.
Huh?
I'm right here.
You have it right?
Yeah, I use them every single day.
You use them every single day, right? So
Yeah.
the case method teaching is a very normal way of teaching management classes and project management classes.
Does that here.
Right. And the Harvard business cases are fairly independent. They're usually written by, people that are on GSIs. When I was in grad school, I've written a whole bunch of those too, so you might find me as an author for some of the cases. And they're generally independent because they're written with education in mind. I think where it stops being independent is if you're the researcher trying to get the facts out from the management that some people don't like to tell, the things that don't work. Yeah, but in general, it's considered a pretty legitimate source.
Yeah, I guess it also just has that business lens to it, and so, they're probably not going to focus as much on the social aspect.
Yeah, although, what's interesting about it is that, they do have a social mission to basically streamline the process of...
Right.
This is very similar to the fisherman's, the Jensen case, right? Okay, so with that in mind, Johnny, I was asking everyone, should we even have class today? What should we do? Do you guys want to revisit some of the things that we've done, or should I just keep plowing through the case? I think the consensus was, let's do the case, but let's make it short. Okay, so tell me a little bit about what is the problem here that they're trying to solve? What is the information flow? Right? Because again, this is an ICT case. It's very typical. It's very hard to find any type of ICT project cases because it's such a new field. But this is a fairly good case because it illustrates some of the very typical issues that arise when it comes to implementation. And we are talking about implementation, right? Where in the big circle we are. So somebody give me a shout out about what is this problem that they are trying to solve. So maybe somebody just tell me what was the old non-IT system like? What happened there when you have a farmer, right? You're trying to get a flow from the farmer to this ITC folks, right? Who basically buys soybeans. So that's the bottom line of the story. What is the old system flow? How do they end up? How do they buy these seeds from the farmers?
Well, there's a whole kind of supply chain that they're trying to discover.
Awesome.
Efficiencies for. So
Were there middlemen?
Right. So there's these Mindys or Mandys.
The Mandys. Okay. What are the Mandys?
They're a government decreed auction that was supposed to help stem corruption and offer transparency through the buying process.
Right. Were you guys at Jenna's lecture? If you were there, then you would remember that it's very similar to that auction, right? Except that the Mandy is in the town hall, and in her case, everybody was next to the beach because it was fishermen. But that's usually how things work. Okay, so what does the farmer do? At harvest, what happens?
So they have to travel a long way from their village to one of these Mandys that are regionally based. And they can only do this, or they only have incentive to do this a couple times a year.
Right.
At harvest.
Yeah, and then it gets crowded. They can't go in. They wait 3-4 hours, 3-4 days. Their soybeans might be rotting because there's no storage. They need to sell it. And then what happens at the Mandys? Who are these? What are the CAs?
So they are the government. Are they work for the government? I can't remember.
There is a government bidder there, right? It's not that strange a system, but this government the government, I don't know what they call him, but a bidder. He's the one that goes and then he says, okay, today's pricing market is, will start at 80 cents a pound, for example. And then the CAs are the ones that actually bid. So these folks are the middlemen.
Oh, right, they're not ITC.
Right? And they work for all kinds these are the suppliers, so they work for all kinds of retailers or processes, and one of their clients is the ITC. So what happens? What happens here is that the government says, okay, today's price will start at 80 cents, and then they start auctioning, right? So when they auction, what happens is that, well, the farmer doesn't really know what is the real market rate, do I even know it is 80 cents? And I'm really desperate. If I've been waiting here for 3 days, I don't care, even if I'm at a loss, I need to sell. So there's a choke of information around here that the eChoupal is trying to solve. So then what happens? The CAs basically buy the stock, they take it, and then they put it in trucks and they send it to the ITC, which is the firm, right? So what are some of the problems that they see here that made them want to start the eChoupal project?
Like the middleman has an advised price that the global commodity market people will say they were willing to buy based on their knowledge of the global market, and the middleman doesn't have an incentive to actually sell at that price, right? So they could sell at a lower price and then buy it from the farmer at a
really low price and sell it really high. And the government, the farmer doesn't really know, right? What is his profit margin? If he knew, then he would probably not say okay to this kind of pricing. So that's one big issue, right? So then you have all the other typical issues of a choked up system like that, and you see this maybe in Sahe as well, the inefficiencies. Usually it's time, right? And then your opportunity cost, because if I'm there, I'm spending 3 days at the Mendy's trying to sell my things when I could be spending 3 days planning for my next harvest. Opportunity cost, time, there's storage issues that lead to that, and so a lot of these things, right, is really about information. So what is the solution, the ICT solution that was that ended up being imposed by the ITC? Right, it's an eChoupal.
Yeah, they have well, we have two things. I guess they have connections to the internet, and then they have their own online portal where they provide this information.
So how does your information system look like now? Basically, what they're trying to do is that they're like, well, let's cut out this middle process. Let's try to impose another process that might be as efficient. So what they did was they started with some pilots, and they said, well, okay, let's start with the pilots of 2 or 3 villages, and we'll keep the Mendy system for the non-pilots. So we'll keep going at the way that it has been for these non-pilot places. So instead of the Mendy's right now, you have the internet, right? And the internet provides what kinds of information? Market information, right? Weather, prices, best practices.
Crop information.
Sorry?
Like crop and fertilizer.
Yep, best practices on, it even provides actually this is one set of, this is information, right? And then there's actually a services and sales that ITC figured out the opportunity. So they did not start out with wanting to sell things to the farmers, but that ended up being sort of an added benefit. Okay? So for those of us, just understand that these are very typical problems in ICT projects in developing countries, and usually it's information being choked up by middlemen, the non-transparency of information. So what happens now with the farmers? So this is the old way that they're still doing with the villages that they haven't implemented the project. But what's happening now? So they have this computer, where do they put them? Anybody know?
Where they put the computer?
Yeah. How does it work on a village level? Think about all these village people. They are in farming. What's happening? Where did they go for information?
The community center?
Huh?
Those are the community.
Yeah, good guess. Yes, but instead of the community center, right? That is a logical place. The way that they designed it was they wanted it to be with a lead farmer, right? And they gave him a name. I think he's called the Sanchulak, right? So they plunked a computer in his house. What?
I was just asking which country does this take?
Oh yeah. So they put it in his house, and essentially it's a similar system to what they have done before. He's the trusted leader. The other farmers go to his house, gets information. Except for the fact that right now, instead of not getting no information or getting irrelevant information, they're now getting information from ITC through this internet, pricing, etc., etc., etc. And then what happens is that from here they can sell directly to ITC, bypassing the traditional role of the middleman, right? And then on the other way that Eric had pointed out, that basically they started to, and this was sort of a byproduct or a secondary result that they didn't anticipate, that now ITC could actually be selling to the farmers. And what do they sell? They sell, fertilizers, seeds, etc. Right? So they basically, ITC buys from the farmers soy and then sells to farmers these basic resources on the internet. Okay, any question on the facts of the case?
Well, they also allowed information about the mandies too, so it wasn't just kind of forcing this new, it was like giving them another option.
Great point. So even aside from the villages that they didn't pilot the project in, they say, okay, you don't have to come to us. You have a choice. You can still do it traditionally, but through the Mandis, and you can sell it to us. Or, even with this information, you can actually sell to others. Right? So they say, even if you use this information, you can totally use this information, go back to the Mandis, or even just directly contact any others that you want to, and then sell to them. So they have a choice. Good point, Eric. Anything else to add on this before we go into, why did this project actually seem to work?
It included all the stakeholders?
Possible. So, any questions on this before we go on to why did it work?
What happened to the minis? Who got cut out?
Yeah, the middleman. Okay, that's interesting and that's one of the things that you would likely bring up as a success factor too. Because in a lot of cases, when you actually implement a project like that and you cut out the middleman, these are the folks that would sabotage your system in real life. So what they did was that a lot of times they actually, your lead farmer was a Mandis. So they changed the role of the Mandis so that right now, the Mandis do 1/3 of this. So 1/3 of them is doing what they originally do. 2/3 of them, they do this. So they are the ones that would, do the training for the farmers. They might even be the farmers themselves in some situations. They are the ones that actually, agree to send because they have the trucks and everything, they're the ones that actually still do the selling to the farmers and that to ITC, and they get paid a salary or some kind of a commission fee by ITC. And this is actually one factor for success because, like I mentioned, a lot of times your losers in any system would be the ones that would sabotage the new system. Okay, any other questions on this before we go on to, what are the success factors? Clear about the system? Okay, so tell me, why, and honestly, this kind of issue isn't that different, like I said, than a lot of the other types of a lot of development projects that have a information problem. You could plug anything here, even sex workers, which is a fair game in certain cases. Sex workers, final customers, and then you have your pimps, for example, and you still come up with the same set of issues. It could be anything, your labor, right? Your migrant labor, and then your middleman that does the cheap labor, and they have no choice, and then your final supplier. So just bear in mind, very, very, very generic issues. And the issue too is that generic projects like these have been implemented, but there's a dismal rate. I think in the case they even cited there's a dismal rate. Read this research done by a Stanford student somewhere there to show you that these projects usually are not successful. Why? What makes this project different? What makes this project different? So, the treatment of the middlemen were included. And, losses, right? Because you call them winners or losers. And losses were mitigated. And in fact, from the cases that they say, they actually ended up making more money. Okay, then the second one, what was it about stakeholders? And this is a great guess, given that you haven't read the case, because it's pretty generic too. What did they do in this situation?
Yeah, it all seemed involved. I mean, I don't know if there were more players that had a say or that were excluded, but from what's on the board, it seems as though.
Right, because usually if you think about how are these projects implemented, most of the time it's somebody like us maybe, graduate students that would go down and say, okay, fine, I think that I'm just going to put this computer down, I'm going to put it in this center that I'm going to build. I think what is different in this case is that ITC is a Indian national firm that is also pretty concerned, right? They talk about wanting India to be, glorious and glamorous and wanting to solve this kind of problems with information. So what they did was that they really, really integrated, so they included the stakeholders. They went down, they talked to the farmers, and these are people that they already know because they were dealing with them on this level. So they actually went down and they talked to the farmers, they figured out what was happening, they talked to the middleman, and got some sense of buy-in in some ways. And along with that, they built the project within the existing structures, right? So basically, you can see that there's already a structure that was built in, but the internet solution was sort of an add-on into everything that was already built in. So that was one of the other success factors too. Anything else? How did they, and Sahil mentioned a lot about the trust issues too, and this is the issue here. Any guesses about what the trust issue is?
You have to trust the lead farmer because he's still the middleman to the information.
Right, yeah, and this is a fairly, and that's how they mitigate it, because usually the lead farmer is someone that you already know, you chose him as the leader, he's usually the leader hitman. So yeah, that's one way. And then the other thing is, of course, the lead farmer needs to trust this information, right? And that's the usual problem. It's like, well, how do I know that ITC isn't giving me false information that would encourage me to sell pricing to them at a cheaper price than I might even sell here, right? Or, how do I trust that they really have my interest in mind? How did they do that?
Well, they allow them to make a choice.
Yep, very good.
And that empowers them to Well, it empowers them that they have a part of the process, but also the fact that
Yep.
it's not being imposed on them, and so there's probably more incentive
To trust that.
for them to not to cheat because they're exposing information from not just their own
Mm-hmm.
company.
Yep. It was choice. It was transparent, right? So two things that make it happens is that, Eric, you're right. I mean, you brought this up that there's a choice. Okay, there's this information out here, but we have access to the internet. You can feel free to double check this information anywhere else that you want, except that this information is from the government because that's the only source most of the time. And even after you get this information, you have a choice to go back to the Mandy's and sell it to others, or you can even talk to your lead farmer or your CA that's working here and sell it to others. So that gives them this sense of like, well, why would someone do that unless, they actually trust in their own information and trust that I can make the right choice in the information. So this factor is like one of the make or break type of things. And I also think that the fact that they built the project within the existing structures also led to that. Okay, anything else? What about buy-in? How did they, how did these farmers, many of them which are illiterate, for example, find this useful?
Did it raise their incomes?
Eventually, yes. But even before they do that, so maybe you can say, okay, the proof, right, is in the pudding, right? Is that the, right? So basically, the proof is in the pudding. So that is something that fed back in. But even before this, what would actually have farmers come and say, okay, well, what is the internet, and then okay, what are the pricing, and okay, well, I'm gonna just. I think that this is really something I can use. And it comes back to a fundamental point of right, and this part is basically that it is meeting their needs. That's exactly what they need. There wasn't any extraneous things here that they were not needing. There was no advertisements. And they kept things really simple. Everybody knows what KISS is? Keep it simple, stupid, right? So it's like, everything was very simple. The interface was very simple. The process was very simple, right? And it was appropriate. The technology was appropriate technology because it was just a very simple PC, low power, just internet, one portal, and then you get all the information as and when you can. And the other thing too is that there's a mix of new and old technologies. Does anybody remember what happens when they go in to the meeting and then maybe they don't understand what's happening or they can't read? What kind of old technologies are being used? So the answer is they would go in there and these folks would actually print out, okay, today's pricing, right? So every Monday they go for the meeting. Last week's price and this week's predicted price. He prints it out, he puts it on the board, and it's all in their own local language. So if you think about it, a poster in itself is an old technology. That's a way of communicating. If you wanted to expand that, you can have radio, you can even have a cell phone call-in line or whatever. They didn't have that, but most of the time, new and old technologies are fairly combining, the internet or mobile with new and old technologies would be appropriate. Anything else? Okay. Another thing was that they didn't go like a lot of big projects, like, okay, we have this entire area of soybean farmers, like we work with 17 districts and let's roll out 17. They didn't. They rolled it out 2 at a time, I think, or something like that. So if you look at what are some of the, right, so your implementation rollout was incremental. So it was like, okay, let's roll it out in 1 or 2, and then let's figure out what's the problem, and then let's roll it out again. Anything else to add? This is essentially, the gist of why it was fairly successful, and generally, these are really the factors that contribute to successful implementation of ICT projects. Anything else to add as to why they were successful?
Question. You mentioned these are the successes, but that most of them fail. Do you know where they usually fail? Is there one
on all the points? You can pick anyone. I mean, a lot of times it's trust, right? Because if I went in, I mean, it's maybe, I think Eric was sharing with us earlier too about Sahay, right? Like when you went in to the India market, they're like, well, yet another, employment app. Who are these people? Why would I trust them? And so why would I even use it, right? And it's compounded by the fact that, especially in developing countries, people do that and cheat people out of it. So, that's a huge one. But I think that they could fail on all levels. Most of the time, we come in with sort of not meeting their needs. We come in with a technology in mind that we know, oh yeah, we know what they need. It's a mobile app for, these 5 things. And it's not meeting their needs. Or it's not friendly. It's not simple enough to cater to your audience, for example. So any of these points, usually all of the above. Yeah.
Do you think that because it was supported by like a national corporation that had anything to do with how they were able to approach some of these issues? I mean, it seems like the maintenance of these printers and power supplies and stuff would be something that would be harder for just like a one-time funded campaign.
Yeah, well, and that's the difference, because this was a development project, but it was a development project by ITC. And ITC is actually a for-profit company. It's a for-profit national company in India that buys all kinds of different products, soybeans included, and then processes them and into end products or sell them on. So when they started, they actually did this as these folks, they came with it. They came into this project from a profit angle. They were asking, the guy who's heading the international business was told by his boss, the leader of ITCs, that says, hey, look, you're getting all this supply stuff, all this soybean and things from the farmers. Why are they so expensive? They're so expensive, we're not even making any profits on our own. Can you solve this problem? So because he came in with sort of like a business model type thing, you can argue, that this is more of a social corporate responsibility or even a for-profit model, as opposed to it being more development focused, right? So that's I think one of the key things about them coming in. I think the second thing too is that they have already been working with these people, so folks know that. In fact, in the literature it says farming has not changed for 50 years. These mandis have been around for 50 years, and that was how they have been sold the goods. But these are the farmers that actually know people from ITC, because the CAs do work for them. So they're already kind of peripherally in the system, although not directly in. So when they actually implemented, the guy that's heading the international business, he didn't even send anybody down to the first project he rolled out. He went down and he did the actual training himself. So I think all these little things add up to build a solid sense of trust and a sense that, I'm building this within the existing structures. Okay, any other questions or things to add about implementation?
Well, I think it was interesting they were able to leverage, again, going back to the corporation, that they were able to change the government laws on this, right? They were decreed to go through these meetings, hey, look at us, let me just try this and so having that ability also, we've seen many times the government being like a bottleneck or like a focus of corruption or just, all these reasons that they can, cause failure in a project like this.
Right, well, absolutely. And I mean, it's not mentioned in the case, but my suspicion is that, like any big corporation, in any country, the U.S. included, if you're big enough, you have a lot of government ties. Either some of your cousins are in government, or you have subcontracted certain luxurious contracts to governments. Especially this being India, there must have been bribes that have been paid all over the place to already get their businesses working. So I'm guessing that this is not no knowledge, and I actually am just speculating, I would say. But I think that changing the law is not like how we would see it here. It's probably somebody buying somebody a big dinner and going, this law is really not conducive to me working. And, since I'm not making enough money, my bribe to you will need to be decreased. Unless maybe you can help, talk to this person or that person and see if you can get this proposed clause passed in the next legislative meeting, right? And then my profits are going to increase 50%, so I'll increase what I pay you, by 25%. So I think, and that's the frustrating part too in international development, because if you don't have those contacts, how do you do that? And also from a philosophical angle, a lot of times we ask ourselves, should we be condoning those things, right? And then we're self-perpetuating a corruption and bribing culture that oftentimes we're trying to prevent to begin with or solve. But anyway, that's outside the ambit of the case. But yeah, that is a big deal, but also sometimes it's not a big deal, because you can see how sometimes it's so ridiculously easy to change laws. When you know the right person to ask and the right channels to get payments through. Yeah. Okay. Well, any other questions on successful implementation? Like I said, the thing to take back is just that a lot of these implementation principles we've talked about in different permutations and combinations all throughout the course. And then if you see it being applied in a case study, and if you actually read it, this is a very interesting case that is pretty well written, you can actually get a sense of the story and the case that goes on in the field as to why, why it worked. And in fact, one of the things about legislation was, right, the change of legislation could be argued to be one reason for opening up markets. Changing legislation and policies, right, to effect bigger change, bigger impact. That's another one too. If you could actually get all the way up there instead of just making your project work for your 3 pilot projects, you're actually opening up the entire landscape to more. Okay, well, what next? Any other questions or whatever? And then the other question I wanted to ask was, what should we do now?
You mean for the problem?
Yeah, well, no. Sorry, let's go first. I want to finish this part of things. So any other questions about implementation, even towards your own projects, or any other general questions about implementation before I move on to deciding what to do the next part of class?
I have a quick question. Once you do manage to set all of this up, what is the next action plan on behalf of ITC? Is it just maintenance, providing the correct information and continuing and maintaining the trust?
Well, yeah, and these are the current questions, at least current as when the case was written in 2008, that they were questioning, because they actually managed to get successes over a few years. So they actually saw their revenues increase. They saw demand increase in the field. People were using that. They saw that there was bigger demand from other places aside from their 3 pilots. So they were talking about scaling it up. And then the question that is at the end of the case was, well, what next? Do we increase this to other commodities aside from soybean? Do we, sell this platform or share this platform with other nonprofits so that they can actually use this system for anything else? And that's actually a strategic question. In fact, the case was written with this in mind. From a business perspective, it was more like, well, what is the next steps? So yeah, those were the same questions that they were contemplating. Yeah. And actually, I don't know what happened because I went on the the Soya Chopo website, which is this part, and it's no longer there. So I'm like, oh, well, I don't really know what happened there, because from the end of the case, it sounded like it was pretty progressive. And they still do have the eChopo project and the eChopo website. I just didn't read enough into the eChopo website to find out what happened to the soybean website. Did they morph it into something else that is not soya so that it becomes a generic platform for all kinds of products? I don't know. I might have to read more. Yeah. Okay, any other last questions on implementation, what works, what doesn't? Okay, so with that in mind, what do we want to do right now? So we could call it a day. If we wanted to. What I had planned was sort of an exercise for user design. And it's an interactive exercise where, the exercise would be, well, you've seen how the internet portal will look like. Based on, in the case itself, I think appendix or is it exhibit 1, 2, 3, 4 are all on how the website was going to look like. So what I wanted to do was, one of the things about ICT projects is really about the ICT side, and that's the part that is different from generic or typical international development project. So within this part, there's a lot of things that go on in project implementation, right? There's your requirement analysis, there's your procurement of hardware, software, selecting your hardware and software, maintaining it, trying to control it, etc., etc., etc. One of the things is in user design, which is a very important question to ask, particularly since our target audience are people that are, not generally the people that we generally think of, internet, everybody can access it. So the exercise I had planned was to split in groups and to actually do a paper prototype on a mobile platform on a few of these things. My question is, do you want to do that? Or do you want... I was hoping for more people in class so that we could actually split into groups and actually do the exercise by comparing. But given we could still do 2 groups and actually do some user testing after that, which is sort of a... What do you think? Otherwise, if that's not that useful and you would rather have the rest of the time off, that's also fine with me.
I need to run at the top of the hour at noon.
Okay. What about the rest of you?
Yeah, that sounds
fun. Okay, so why don't we do this? So Lauren, you feel free to just attach to, let's do 2 groups, right? You could pick, grab one, and then what we are going to do is this. Just familiarize yourself with the appendices, right? You can see that within the, so you can see that there is from appendix 1 to 4, you will be able to see that there is a home page, right, that have weather information and has links to the 7 different things that they think farmers will need. That's in the appendix, right? I think there's access to 8 links or something like that. And then, so there's 8, sections. Navigation. Okay, and then from there, out of the 8 sections, the 2 that was highlighted in both the case and the appendices is getting the weather and getting market information. So if you look at those appendices, you will be able to see mock-ups of the existing website. Like I said, the existing website is no longer there. So the exercise is this. Okay, pretend that now we are doing phase 2 of rollout of the soya soy chocolate. And now, in addition to a web interface, we are going to have a mobile interface. And in specifically, what I would like us to do is to split into two groups and actually design using your mockups, using so it's a rapid prototyping exercise that sometimes actually they do in real life, but big groups are usually better. So you can use this, and of course one page is your mobile phone interface. So you can split this with the two groups. So what I would like for you to do is to design enough pages to allow your tester, i.e., a first level testing of a farmer going onto a cell phone, right, a mobile phone, and reaching the home page and having some kind of a way to access, to know, that these are 8 links I can go to. And the 2 tasks that you would have your testers do, because at the end of the exercise, we're going to switch. You're going to test each other's products. You're going to access the weather, right? So you want your tester to be able to navigate to the weather page and display the weather page. And of course, the weather page would have 1 extra link to go deeper, right? Extra information on the weather page. And then they would also be able to get to the market information page with whatever extra information it is. Let's say we want pricing on, let's say pricing in March. Okay, or let's say price fluctuation. So this is what you want your user to get to. So this one you want to be able to predict next month's rainfall or rain, amount of rain. Got it? Does that make sense? So you're just going to design enough pages and you're going to have people press like you would, but this is just a paper prototype to do these things. Yes. Oh, no. This is a smartphone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So imagine it. They have an typical Android phone, and what you're doing is you're just designing the interface. Okay. See you.